So we need to find out the Bible is not reliable. Sometimes it's not. So we need to ask, for example, is John's Gospel reliable, what it says? And virtually all scholars in the world, including many Christian scholars, say in key points it's not reliable. So we need to question the sources and not accept them.
Right, should we do 2 minutes? 2 minutes?
Is the equivalent of the Hadith.
Right. Can you let me at least have my say? Welcome
You
to
what I
join
just
us.
said, by the way, about the unreliability of the Gospels
Okay,
on
well,
occasions.
then,
Do you agree with that?
Right, first of all, let's just do this honourably and do like 2 minutes, because it's much better than
No, I don't want to do 2 minutes, 2 minutes.
Okay, well in that case,
So, quick question. Gospel,
well then let
what
me
is
have
the
this,
gospel?
let me finish having this
Is it
conversation.
the equivalence of Hadith?
Yes, yeah, that's a very good point. The Gospels are like our Hadith. They are man-made texts that are sometimes are reliable and not. So we have to test the Hadith. Who is the author? So who is the author of the Gospel of Matthew? And scholars now know that it's not an eyewitness text written by the Apostle Matthew.
It was written.
Can I make a
It was
point
written
here?
much,
Can I
much
make a point?
later. But we know that Sahih Hadith.
Right, let me make a point. Let me make a point here. Okay. First of all, if you're a Muslim and you're going to bring any charges against the Bible, then
We're not
you have to
bringing
go
charges,
against
we're
the Quran.
talking about objective
because
historical scholarship.
the Quran says in many different surahs, it says that the Bible is reliable. Okay.
No, it doesn't.
If you go
It
to
doesn't
Surah
mention the word
3:3, if you go to
The
Surah
Quran doesn't
4,
mention
1,
the
2,
Bible
3.
anywhere.
Okay.
Nowhere in the Quran does it mention the word Bible. It mentions the scriptures. It's not heard by.
Okay. Let's see what Paul is talking about here. Okay.
But anyway, coming back to the
No,
Gospels.
we haven't finished.
No,
Let
we
me
need-
make my
no, we need
point.
to- because-
because he's here. Paul is saying that the Gospel, the Bible is not reliable,
Yes.
and I want to prove to you from this scripture that the Bible
I'm not
is
talking about
reliable.
the Quran.
Okay, so
I'm
if, you're,
saying-
so if you're a Muslim
No, I'm not
and
talking
you're
about
going to
the
say the
Quran.
Bible's not reliable, you're actually going against the eternal word of Allah and what that's saying.
What I'm talking about
Okay.
here is objective biblical scholarship in the West about her Bible
but he's-
from her own scholars.
He
so
can make
let's
that
stick with
argument,
her
but
own
then he has to abandon Islam.
No, no,
okay,
no.
so as a Muslim, he has to
talking about
abandon
your-
Islam to
because
make
she
that
doesn't-
argument.
She doesn't accept the Quran, so I'm talking about her own scholars like Richard Balkan, Jimmy Dunn, and others who she probably has never read. That I'm saying her own scholars do not believe, for example, that the disciple Matthew wrote Matthew's Gospel.
Okay.
That it's anonymous and it's a 2nd century text
Okay.
and contains much that is not factually true.
Okay, let's. Okay,
So,
I'm
can
gonna
we talk
ask-
about your
No,
scholars?
because I don't want you to talk over me.
Question.
So I'm
Sorry.
saying.
Why does the Quran actually, the Prophet Muhammad actually write about the Virgin Mary being a virgin? The Jews don't think the Virgin Mary's a virgin.
Okay, can we just stick to
the
one topic,
Quran
sir? Is that okay?
has a good association with Jesus. Jesus has to be someone ideal for his mother to be a virgin.
So the Quran says that Mary is a virgin. So you shouldn't have a problem with Mary being a virgin.
No, I don't have a problem with that.
Okay. So
I'm just saying-
none of us have a
but I'm
problem with
just
that.
saying
But I'm asking, why do
all
your
the
scholars
Abrahamic faiths
deny that your
have
Gospels are
diverse
reliable?
elements.
That's my question.
Okay.
So how many Gospels
Right. So
do you have
you're
here?
telling
We
me.
have 4 Gospels in the New Testament, and New Testament scholars today think they're often reliable, that they tell factually inaccurate and unreliable information. Can I give you some examples? Can I give you some examples of how your own scholars admit this? People like Richard Balkan and others admit that there are errors in your Gospels. Can I give you an example? For example, it says in Matthew's Gospel, chapter 27, I think, this is what's called the zombie apocalypse, when it talks about at the time that Jesus was seen to be crucified, that people came
I'm going
out
to do 2 minutes, 2 minutes. Otherwise, it's not fair.
No,
okay?
I'm not
Otherwise
going
you
by
just
your rules, I'm afraid. This is Speaker's Corner, we have to go by your rules. The question is
Is the Bible reliable?
that it talks about people coming out of their tombs, being resurrected and walking around Jerusalem and going home, going back to their homes. Now there's only 2 lines in the entire history of the world that mentions this amazing public resurrection of the dead. Mark doesn't mention it, John doesn't mention it, Luke doesn't mention it, Acts doesn't mention it. Josephus, a contemporary Jewish historian in Jerusalem, knows nothing about this. But the point is this, that her own scholars, even Mike Licona, I'm sure you've heard of Mike Licona, a big evangelical apologist in America, he concedes that this is not probably historically reliable, because no one else knows anything about it. It looks legendary, it looks like a myth. Now, if Matthew can make up stories like that, what other stories has he made up as well? And there are other stories he's made up. So we can't just go back to the sources in our Bible, because our own scholars, evangelical scholars, admit that the Gospels contain made-up stories to some extent. So we need to test these documents. Do they contain truth or not? And that's something that she will not do. She just wants to attack Islam because she's like that. That's her
Okay,
agenda.
I'm just pointing out Paul's inconsistency because he claims to be a Muslim, and Muslims follow this book, the Quran, the eternal
I'm
word
talking
of
about your
Allah.
own scholars
Okay,
here.
you've had
I'm
a
not
long
talking
talk.
about the Quran.
Okay, what
your
the
own
Quran
scholars
says,
admit
what the Quran
that there
says.
are errors and myths in the Gospels. How do you respond to that when Mike Licona has said, it's on YouTube, that this statement is not historical? It's almost certainly a legendary.
Why do you interrupt me? I didn't interrupt
No,
you.
I'm
I let
asking
you
you a
talk for a
question.
long time.
I'm asking you a question.
Let her speak.
So thank you.
I'm asking you a
Thank
question. How do you feel about Mike Licona, for example, saying that your Gospels contain unhistorical statements in it?
Do you know what?
Okay.
How do you feel about that?
I'm giving you my answer, and I will address the point you made about Mike Licona. But
Please
first of
do.
all, I would like to start
But
with.
Mike
I would like
Licona-
to start.
Right.
Okay, because I would like to draw attention
Will you
to the
address my
fact.
question
I
about
will
how
address
the
your
Gospels,
question.
according to your own
But
scholars,
respectfully, let
are
me make my
not
point
seen
first.
as reliable?
Let me make my point
Will you
first.
address this point?
I will.
I'll
You just
hold
have
you
to
to
wait.
that. I'll
Okay,
hold
you'll
you
have
to
to
that.
wait.
So how long have you got to make your point?
Okay, so do you want to do 2 minutes? 2 minutes?
I'm
now?
asking you, how long are you going to make your point for?
It's going to be about 2 minutes.
Right, I'll wait. You
Okay.
make your point for 2
Right.
minutes. And
So-
then we'll come back and I'll hold you to that.
So basically, Paul is a Muslim, and Paul is here to attack the Bible. He's doing something that the Quran doesn't
quoting
do.
our own scholars.
Okay. Basically, the Quran says in numerous verses, for example, Surah 3:3, Surah 4:1-6, 2:1-6, it says that these things have been sent down. That Muslims are to believe in that which was sent down to you, as well as what sent down to us, as well as what was sent down to you, the Quran. It says, for example, that Allah makes no distinction between the scriptures. Okay. So, and he's referring to the New Testament and to the Hebrew Bible. Okay, the Old and the New Testament. He says that Christians, you ought to judge on what has been sent down. Why would he do that if he's not talking about the Bible? If he's talking about some scriptures have been lost for eternity, why would he do that if we're to judge on it? And this is his eternal word. He said that the Gospels are guidance for mankind. It even says you Muslims are meant to look for Muhammad in the Bible. I don't believe the Quran, so I don't think Muhammad is in the Bible. But the fact is, by attacking all the way through this book, it doesn't bring up verses from Matthew. Go, by the way, you can't trust the Bible on this and this. You can't do it this. So to even make this argument, Paul effectively is going against his own religion. But now he did make a point.
Right, about Mike Licona and other scholars, why do they doubt the historicity of your own
Please don't
Gospels?
interrupt.
So
Okay.
you're going to address that question,
Okay.
which is
What
my
is the difference
question.
between gospel and Bible?
Can we because that's going off subject? Can you now address Mike Licona
I
and
will come to that
your
point.
own
I will come
scholars
to that
who
point.
deny that the historical facts in the Quran, that those particular facts are historical, that they're made up, they're mythological?
Okay. I don't think Mike Licona will go as far as to say they're mythological. I think you're putting
What does he
words in
say?
his
What
mouth.
does he say?
I don't know. You obviously know
Well,
better than me, but
I'm
I'm just saying that I don't think he would use the words mythological.
He said they didn't happen.
And
The
actually,
events probably didn't happen.
Okay, and actually, what Mike
Gospel says they did
Mike
happen.
Licona is not the only scholarly source about this. There's actually some contention over that. So there are other scholars out there. For example, Lydia McGrew, who makes the case for a maximal data approach to the Gospels, and very much affirms their historicity. So you're being a little bit kind of selective in your
Can you address the
selection
point I made
of
about
scholarship. But also, let me get
people
because I'm
coming
going to
out of
talk
the
about the
graves,
Bible now.
and no other source in history knows about this very public event in Jerusalem. None of the other Gospels, neither Acts, nor Josephus, Tacitus, no one else in history. Are you simply saying this is history, that the people came out of their graves en masse, walked around Jerusalem and went home, and no one else in history knows about this apart from 2 lines in Matthew? Are you seriously arguing?
Okay, so here's the thing. Can you quote for me from an ancient source something that says this didn't happen? We saw it in Matthew, but actually no, this is completely wrong. It didn't happen. Have you got anything like that?
What happened?
No, right. Thank you. So basically,
I haven't
it's
finished.
conjecture. No, it's
finished.
my turn. It's still my turn.
You're still
okay,
talking.
but I'm
I
saying
can cite a
if
source. I
okay,
can cite a source.
can you? Which
Yes.
one?
Right. Will you let me speak, or are you going to shut me up?
No, I'm just asking the
Right.
question.
What it is, if you have a public event, a mass resurrection of the dead, where people in Jerusalem walk around in a public place and they go home to their families, and no one in history knows about this, neither Matthew, nor Luke, nor John, nor the book of Acts, set in
mentions
Jerusalem,
it.
neither Josephus, who is a Jewish historian in Jerusalem, neither anyone else in entire history knows about this so-called alleged zombie apocalypse. No one knows about it. This puts a question mark against the historicity of
What
this.
you've not
That's
done
why
is quote a
virtually
source, which is
all
what I asked
scholars
for.
in the world do not think
you're not
it's
answering the
historical.
question. Paul is not answering the
There is
question.
no evidence for it because no one knows anything about it. There would be evidence.
There is nothing that
happened.
says that Paul is not doing what I asked him to do, which is to quote an ancient source that says this line in Matthew never happened, absolutely never happened. Disregard it. Matthew's not reliable.
Acts doesn't record it happening. Mark doesn't record it happening.
Then you're making an argument from silence.
Josephus doesn't know it
Then you're
happening.
making an argument from silence. Yes,
this
you
is an
are.
argument.
You can say because it's this is
happened, why
silent,
do they
because
ignore
Luke
it?
is silent, because
Why
John
do-
is silent.
why
Therefore,
do
it didn't
they
happen.
ignore it if
That
it
is an
happened?
argument from
Let me ask
silence.
you, if it happened, why do they all ignore it? Why would they ignore such an amazing public event?
I
Why
don't
would they ignore
know.
it?
I'm not going to try and psychologize the people who wrote the
I'm
Gospels.
asking you,
Unlike you,
why, if
you're
you
trying
were
to
a Jewish
psychologize
historian,
them.
an amazing public event like a mass resurrection of the dead happened on your patch, and you're an historian, why would you fail to record it in your history of Jerusalem?
I don't know. Why don't you, go
don't
back
know.
in time in your
She
time
doesn't
machine?
know the answer because
No,
the
because
answer
it's an argument from
is
silence.
simple because it didn't happen. Any
Oh, were you
idiot,
there? Were you
any
there?
idiot knows this. You'd be defeated, my dear.
Okay.
Come
no,
on.
No, no, no.
You've
Paul,
lost the argument.
So really, no,
You've
but you're
lost
making
the
an
argument.
argument from silence.
Why would no
don't you
one
get in your
record
time
it?
machine and
No
go
one
back to the
record
time
it.
of the first century and you work it out for yourself? I don't have a time
Of
machine.
course they
You
record
don't
it.
have a time
Josephus
machine.
would
You have
record it.
nothing to say
Luke,
specifically.
who bases
Actually,
his
that
gospel,
didn't happen.
Luke,
Didn't
who
happen.
bases an account in Acts in Jerusalem, and is very keen to point out the miraculous qualities, never mentions this either. In his gospel, he doesn't mention it. Tacitus doesn't mention it. Josephus, no one mentions this mass resurrection of the dead in public, in broad daylight, of all the believers who walked around Jerusalem and went home to have tea with their family. No one knows about it, but you believe it because of two lines in the book of Acts, book of Matthew. That is a bad argument.
I'm sorry, but Paul
A
hasn't
very
answered
bad
my
argument.
question, which he's brought something to say from
It's
an
on the
ancient
Apocalypse
source.
of
Actually,
Matthew.
this never happened. The fact is,
Why
yes,
didn't they
Matthew
record
might
it?
have experienced something.
You see,
Matthew.
they all recorded the death and resurrection of Jesus, allegedly.
Thank you. They
Yeah.
all recorded
Yeah.
the death and resurrection
Allegedly.
of Jesus. My
But they
faith
didn't
is
record-
based on the fact that
but they
Jesus
failed to
died and
record
resurrected.
the mass
There are
resurrection
incidental details.
of
There are other
hundreds,
details.
of
There are
hundreds
other
of people
details. It
in
doesn't say hundred. It doesn't say hundreds. It doesn't say hundreds. It doesn't say
So
hundreds.
it defies common sense and rationality.
I tell you what else defies common sense and rationality. Muhammad going on a winged horse up to the heavens. Do you believe that happened? Do you believe that Muhammad went on a winged horse up to the Hijra?
I have no idea what you're talking
The
about.
Mirage, sorry? Do you
I have
do you
no
believe
idea
that?
what you're talking about.
Oh, you don't know
There is
your own
no
religion?
winged horse that
You
I'm
don't
aware
believe-
of.
Okay, then you don't believe.
She's got an obsession with winged horses. I'm talking about a mass resurrection
Anyway, the
that
point
no one
is-
knows about.
Okay.
But they know about the resurrection of Jesus, you believe. But when it comes to the resurrection of hundreds, possibly thousands of people in broad daylight in downtown Jerusalem, no one knows anything about it apart from two lines in Matthew. The historian Josephus, the world-famous, reputable historian, doesn't record it, and he's from Jerusalem. Of course he'd mention it. It'd be the most astounding miracle in history. But the reason he doesn't mention it is because it didn't happen.
Oh, so sorry, Paul, you are telling me that you've got a time machine and you went back to Josephus and you asked him why he didn't include that
zombie
detail?
apocalypse in
Okay,
Matthew
so
27.
you're making again an argument from silence
No, is it
for
when
the
the
fact that Luke
resurrection
doesn't
of the
mention it,
unbelievers?
that Mark doesn't
I'll
mention
read out
it,
the verse for you.
that John doesn't
And you
mention it.
can
It must
decide
be.
whether or not
It must
Jesus-
not have happened. That's really odd. That's just a really
the
odd thing to
gospel was
happen.
man-made,
And
yeah?
yet you're saying because this is an
That's why
extraordinary thing.
scholars
You know
do not
what?
record
I
it.
do
Do not
believe
think
in the
it's
resurrection of
historical.
Jesus. It's an extraordinary thing. And actually, if many dead people come to life again, that's an extraordinary thing. If God can raise Jesus from the dead, yes, He can raise lots of people from the dead, and they can walk around Jerusalem, and that's fine with me. I don't have a problem with the miraculousness of it, and I don't have a
virtually
problem.
all scholars in the
And-
world think it's a fiction. It's a made-up story.
Virtually all
including
scholars in
our
the
own
world.
scholars. People like Mike Lacona have said on record in public they do not think it records historical fact. So I'm afraid your gospel contains untruths. You can't just refer to the Gospel of Matthew when it contains made-up stories that virtually all scholars in the world accept are fiction. And you just can't go, oh, it says it in the Bible. Well, the Bible could be wrong. It could be a made-up story. Your own scholars confess this, like McCona. You need to do
Okay.
harder intellectual work than just quote the Bible. You need to look at the historical reliability of the Bible. And
Yeah.
it's not reliable all the time.
Okay,
I'm
you've
afraid.
not showed me, in terms of doing
No,
some
not all
hard
the time,
work,
not all
Paul,
the time, no.
you've not showed me any reliable source
it's
to tell me
man-made. It's a man-made
definitively
book.
that this didn't
There's a
happen.
margin
Let me
for
quote-
error.
let me quote the
Quoting from
verse for you.
scholars, but
This is
you
what-
weren't around in the
This
first
is what only
century.
two verses in history say about this amazing miracle. The earth shook, the rocks were split, the tombs were opened, and many bodies of the saints who had fallen asleep were raised. and it came out of the tombs and entered the holy city and appeared to many people. So says the Bible. But it's funny, isn't it, that no one in recorded history knows about this. No other gospel. This is Matthew's Gospel, chapter 27, verse 53 and 52.
Do you believe it now?
Do you believe that? Why would it appear to many people and no one know about this?
Here's the thing.
In Matthew, Luke, John, Acts, Josephus, Tacitus, nowhere in recorded history, apart from these two little verses. That's why your own scholars say it's made up. And if this is made up, what other stories has Matthew made up?
Can I answer the question? Can I answer the question?
It's a mixture of legends and history.
Let me answer the question.
That's the truth.
Let me answer the question.
So you just can't quote your earlier sources when they contain fiction, according to your own scholars.
Okay, so Paul has a problem with the fact that it's a miraculous event and it's an extraordinary event, okay? But he doesn't apply the same criteria to his own book, okay? He doesn't apply...
Why would they record the
Let's look at the mirage. Sorry. The mirage. Okay.
We're talking about Matthew 27 here.
Okay, yeah, but I'm just saying let's apply the same criteria.
Okay,
you're finding an issue. We have an issue, okay, with an extraordinary happening in the Bible. And you're saying because it's in the Bible, it's not corroborated. Wait a minute, because it's not corroborated by other people. Okay, by other people, then that must make it not true. First of all, you're going against your own Quran because your Quran tells you the Bible is the Bible.
You are misrepresenting my argument.
Okay, you have an issue with the miraculousness of it, and you're also not providing me any evidence to say no, this didn't happen. Matthew is making it up.
Of course, I'm evident. The evidence is that no one knew about it. Otherwise, he would have recorded it. That's the evidence. It was a public miracle in broad daylight when hundreds of people resurrected from the dead, and no one records it.
Matthew does. Matthew does. Okay, let me apply the same criteria.
That's unbelievable.
Unbelievable. I'll tell you what else is unbelievable.
Unbelievable.
Muhammad's mirage journey.
She wants to attack Islam.
Change the subject. Because I want you to be consistent. I want you to be consistent in your methodology.
Can you answer my point?
Be consistent in your methodology.
Answer my point.
I've answered your point.
You haven't. You simply said it happened. You simply said it happened. That's not an argument. Why did no one else record it in history? A public event of mass resurrection from the dead, and no one knows anything about it.
Matthew records it.
But why does no one else? Why does Mark not record it? Why does Luke not record it? Why does John not record it? Why does Acts not record it? Why does Josephus not record it? Why does Tacitus? All these people knew the area, and none of them bothered to record the most amazing public events in history. Now, I would question the truth of Matthew any day, and your scholars also agree, like Mike Licona, that this is not an historical event.
I want to believe in
this.
Wait a minute.
He wants to believe. He wants to believe.
How can you explain
Preach, brother, preach.
Okay, so here's the thing. Paul is taking one issue with one verse, okay? But let's apply the same criteria. First of all, to the Bible, okay? Which is the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ. It's in Matthew, it's in Mark, it's in Luke, it's in John, it's in Acts. It's in all the letters of Paul. It's referred to the death and resurrection of Jesus, okay? The resurrection of any person is a miraculous event, okay? It's not such a stretch. If God can do one miraculous event like that, and he does more than that, sure, he can bring lots of people to life at once, and it's perfectly feasible that that's something that only Matthew might have seen. Yeah, it's extraordinary. Yes, it's not in the other Gospels, but we have nothing. We have nothing in ancient sources to say no. This is definitely didn't happen. You know, something that actually disproves it. Okay, so Paul is making an argument from science, and yet he's not willing to engage with the fact that all of the Gospels do proclaim the miraculous nature of Jesus' death and resurrection. He's completely ignoring that. He's completely ignoring that, and he's going straight to this verse as somehow to prove that the Gospels are not reliable. Again, something that his Quran doesn't tell him to do. His Quran tells him to do the opposite. But let's also, let's look at this though. Let's apply the same criteria to something really miraculous, okay? Prophet Muhammad in one night from Mecca to Jerusalem, and then an ascension in the heavens. Okay, this is the Quran, I think it's Surah 17. Okay, now do we have any eyewitnesses to that at all? Who wrote it down?
Yes, we do.
Who?
Right. I tell you who the eyewitness is. It's the most reliable, credible, infallible witness conceivable. and his name is God.
That is hilarious.
Notice how she
that is
laughs.
the funniest thing I've ever
Notice how she
heard.
laughs.
That is the
because this is in
funniest
the
thing
Quran.
I've ever heard.
Notice how she laughs. Because Matthew's Gospel, according to her own scholars, we don't know who the author is of Matthew.
We don't know who
unknown,
authored the
anonymous
Quran.
Gospel. We don't know who wrote
down?
it.
Who wrote the Quran down, Paul?
But God, the Quran.
Answer my question. Who wrote the Quran down?
Came from God. It is the actual.
Who wrote it down?
So in terms of
Who wrote it
reliability,
down?
well, lots of people did. Lots of people did.
Yeah. How do you know that they were writing what Muhammad heard? And how do we know that what Muhammad heard was God?
Oh, that's quite easy to answer.
It wasn't even God. It was the angel Gabriel. Okay, so there's loads of
It came from God. But like the Torah came through an angel. If you attack Islam, you destroy your own Old Testament as
What
well.
eyewitnesses? Just tell me any eyewitness.
Will you be consistent?
Just tell me. Yeah, no, I'm asking
Will
you
you
to be
be
consistent.
consistent?
At least
The Torah
to this.
came through an
Wait a
angel
minute.
according to Paul.
At least to.
Who saw the angel?
At least to this event in Matthew,
Yes.
we have at least one eyewitness.
We have one eyewitness.
Matthew, tell me any eyewitness
No,
at all.
because he's not an
to the
eyewitness.
Quran's revelation.
No, he's not
who
an
heard
eyewitness.
the same voice that Muhammad did. To heard the
Matthew
voice
is
of Allah,
not an
just like
eyewitness
Muhammad.
account. According to your own scholars, and yes, I can name many of them, the Gospel of Matthew today is not seen as an eyewitness
Well,
account.
according to the
It's
early
seen
church, Matthew's
it is
Gospel
seen
is from
now
Matthew the
by
tax
the
collector.
latest critical scientific methodology as a second generation, not an eyewitness account. However,
So you're
every
going against,
Muslim,
so those
every
scholars
Muslim on
are
earth
going against the
will
early
affirm
church. The early
that
church
the
didn't have a
Quran is
problem
an
with Matthew's.
eyewitness account because it is from God Himself.
Sorry.
God is the author of the Quran.
That is not an eyewitness.
You cannot
That
compare
is not an
an
eyewitness.
unknown
That is not
writer with God Himself. You
You
lose.
can.
You
No, no, I'm
lose.
sorry.
You lose.
There is nobody.
You
no
cannot
one
compare
can
a man with God.
No one can
She would trust
corroborate
a
Muhammad's
man's opinion
revelations.
over
No one
God.
can do that.
So why does the Quran say that the Virgin Mary's a virgin? What is so significant?
Because it's true. Because she was. That's why it says it.
So then
It's
Jesus.
true, that's why.
So if that's true, then
true.
Jesus must be able to do what Matthew says he can do.
The point is that Matthew is not. You see, if you look at Matthew itself,
The Quran is
it doesn't
completely
say it's an
unwitnessed
eyewitness
by
account.
anybody.
It says in the third
The Quran is
person about what
compiled
they did.
by
It's
people
not
who did not
eyewitness in the first
hear
person.
from God themselves. The Quran, people fought over the compilation
Let
of
me
the
show you
Quran.
something.
Okay, the
Abraham,
Quran is not from
right?
God.
Let's
The
go back to
reciters
Let's go
argued
back
among
to
themselves
Abraham.
about
Let's go
which
back to-
surahs should go
let's
in and
go
which
back to
shouldn't.
one of the greatest
Okay,
fathers
there's no
of
eyewitnesses to what
all
Muhammad heard and
scholars.
said.
That's not true.
Nothing
There is
at all.
eyewitness. There
Let's
is
go
eyewitnesses
back-
to the
let's go
revelation.
back to
When
Abraham.
Gabriel
They spoke to him too.
in Bukhari,
Let's go back to Abraham,
Bukhari
right?
records
Because
people who saw Gabriel talking to Muhammad.
Right?
So you're
Abraham,
wrong.
Really?
You're wrong.
Look it up.
You're
Look it
wrong.
up. Look it
You're
up.
wrong.
Right?
It's in Bukhari.
Abraham,
It's in Bukhari.
Look it up.
It's in Bukhari.
Abraham,
You got it wrong.
Right?
Look it up.
Abraham
You got it wrong.
Abraham changed the dynamic.
We don't know who the author
Look
Matthew
it up.
is.
Listen,
Huh?
Abraham.
You look
The
it up.
early
I've read
church.
it.
Oh, you don't. I'm so. It's
Right.
fascinating how you're
Go
not
Google
interested.
it. Google
You're
it.
not
Don't be
interested,
lazy.
right? You're not
I think
interested.
you have an iPhone X by now.
Listen,
I mean,
right?
wasn't it an
If you
iPhone
really
6 or
want to
7?
understand how religion is
This is an
If you-
iPhone
right.
10. You need one of those.
If you want to understand how religion is forged, you've got to go back to Abraham because he wrote the first two
I've never met
treaties.
him. Where can I meet him to
Right?
ask him
No,
about this?
he wrote the first. He got the first two treaties signed. He changed the thinking of the Western and Eastern world when he said stop child sacrifice because he was going to sacrifice his son. You're going to
say
say
child
that.
sacrifice.
You will say that. Oh, God told him to do it, but he knew that his son Isaac was going to hustle. Jacob was going to hustle Esau out of his inheritance.
Anyway, the point
And
is
so
that
he wanted
companions
to
of Muhammad
sacrifice
did meet,
him. The
see
same
Gabriel.
way
They did
that
see him
in
talking
the
to Gabriel.
Quran,
Did they hear the same voice? Did they hear the same voice? Let's check it out. Let's check it out.
You look it up. You educate yourself. Tim.
no matter what, right?
I'm not your dear.
Abraham
Sorry,
changed
darling.
the psychology
Not your darling.
of human
Sorry, sweetie.
beings forever
Anything else?
by saying child sex because he was one of the master intellects.
She and I having we're having a discussion. You're giving a lecture. We don't need a lecture.
Abraham was
We're having a discussion.
I know, but I'm just trying to say that all religion goes back to Abraham, doesn't it?
No, it doesn't.
All
Was Abraham the first human being on earth?
No, he wasn't. But
Right. What about Enoch?
Islam.
What about Abraham?
Somebody help me out.
Islam goes back to Abraham.
Somebody help me out. Can you find the hadith about somebody witnessing Muhammad's revelations? Can you help me out?
Stranger asking the prophet of God about religion. Nevertheless, Muhammad goes along with it very respectfully and answers Gabriel's questions. He says the first pillar is this, the second pillar is this, the third pillar. He goes to the 5 pillars of Islam. And then
Oh, okay.
when
Let's read it. I think I've got it now.
when Gabriel goes, Muhammad says, if I remember rightly, do you know who that was? And he says that was Gabriel himself, the agent of revelation.
Let's read it. Okay?
Well, I just-
Umar ibn al-Khattab said, one day when we were with God's messenger, a man with very white clothing and very black hair came up to us. No mark of travel was visible on him, and none of us recognized him.
We're trying to listen
Okay.
to what she's saying.
None of us recognized him, okay? Sitting down before the Prophet, leaning his knees against his, and placing... Oh, that's interesting. Sitting down, Gabriel, the angel, everyone, sitting down before the Prophet, leaning his knees against his and placing his hands on his thighs. He said, tell me, Muhammad, about submission. How interesting that an angel
Can you read
is
it instead
submitting
not
to a
preach?
human being.
Yeah, fascinating.
As a
Can you read
Muslim,
out
you should be really disturbed by that.
Go give me your
because this is
evangelical
shirk.
missionary spin on it. Just read it. Read it out. Because exactly what I just said. Don't
Thank
corrupt
you
it with
for
your
the
language.
hadith confirming that
Will you read out the hadith?
actually Gabriel is committing shirk by deferring to Muhammad.
See, she's not reading it
He
out.
replied, I'm finished.
No, don't spin it. You see, you're
No,
being
I'm
very
gonna-
dishonourable
I'm just
to
gonna
Islam.
finish reading.
You're giving your
gonna finish
poison
reading.
as you're reading it out. Be honourable and
No, I'm
read
just-
it out
I'm just telling
without
you the
your
text.
missionary
Okay.
corruption.
No, I'm going to
Just read it
I'm going
like
to
an honest
expose
woman.
it because I think as
Don't
Muslims,
just read
I think
it.
you need to ask
because
the
my
question,
claim is
why
the
is
companions
Gabriel
did
bowing
see
to Muhammad?
Gabriel,
Okay.
and they did hear Gabriel's
Can I
speech.
finish?
But
He replied.
Can you read it?
I am reading it. He replied, submission means that you should bear witness that there is no... It's interesting how Muhammad has to
Just
teach Gabriel
read it.
about Islam.
She won't just read it.
Interesting that Muhammad has to teach Gabriel about Islam. And yet Gabriel brings revelations from Allah, and yet Gabriel is going to Muhammad to teach an angel about Islam. Ask yourself this
Read
question.
it out. It explains it as you read it.
Muhammad replies, thank you, Muhammad, for teaching Gabriel about religion. Submission means that you should bear witness that no God but God, and that Muhammad is God's messenger, okay? And that you should perform ritual prayer. This is telling an angel this. Angel,
we
you
know.
just say that Muhammad is
Can
God's
you just
messenger.
read it out
okay?
and not give your
Okay.
commentary on it, please?
Perform the ritual
Have
prayer,
some respect.
pay the alms tax, fast during Ramadan, and make the pilgrimage to the house if you're able to go there. The man said, you've spoken the truth. We were surprised at his questioning him and then declaring that he had spoken the truth. He said, now tell me about faith. He replied, faith means that you have faith in God, his angels, his books, his messengers, and the last day, and that you have faith in the measuring out both its good and evil. Remarking that he had spoken the truth, he then said, now tell me about doing what is beautiful. He replied, doing what is beautiful means what you should worship God as you see him. For even if you do not see him, he sees you. Then the man said, tell me about the hour. The Prophet replied, why is Gabriel asking all of this, Muhammad? The Prophet replied, about that he who is questioned knows more than the questioner. The man said, then tell me about its marks. He said, the slave girl will give birth to her mistress, and you will see the barefoot, the naked, the destitute, the shepherds vying with each other in the building. Then after the man went away, after I'd waited for a long time, the Prophet said to me, do you know who the questioner was, Umar? I replied, God and his messenger know best. He said, he was Gabriel. He came to teach you your religion. How interesting. How interesting.
So notice,
no,
now
I'm
we've
going to
concluded
speak
that.
something.
You made the argument. The
Gabriel
reason she's reading
doesn't
this out
identify
is because
himself
you said that no one
to the
saw
man.
Gabriel. I said, in fact, many of his companions, Sunni companions, not only heard him but saw Gabriel,
Did they, though?
whom Gabriel revealed the
Who
Quran
tells
to.
them it's
So,
Gabriel?
will you now admit you were
Who
wrong?
tells them it's
Will you
Gabriel?
admit you were
No,
wrong?
I'm not wrong because actually,
But it's there,
who
there's the
tells them it's
evidence for
Gabriel?
you.
Muhammad tells them it's Gabriel. Muhammad tells them it's Gabriel. Actually, again,
He's not a
Gabriel
liar.
is dependent
Muhammad is an
on
reliable
Muhammad
truth
to make
teller.
himself known. Muhammad tells them it's Gabriel. Gabriel doesn't pipe up and go, guys, Gabriel here. Can you all hear what I'm saying? Can you all hear what I'm saying? Gabriel doesn't do that. Actually, it's dependent on Muhammad. Okay, Gabriel leaves the scene and then Muhammad conveniently says, hey, that was Gabriel. And by the way, were you listening to what Gabriel said? Gabriel said, you've got to follow Muhammad and his messenger.
Yes.
How self-serving is that?
Why is it
There's
self-serving?
no external proof here. There's no eyewitness here that that actually was Gabriel. Gabriel doesn't identify himself as Gabriel to the people sitting there. So I'm sorry, but your proof has completely failed.
Okay,
Now, try again. Is there any other eyewitness, actually from let's say within 100 years of Muhammad's death, any eyewitness apart from Muhammad to the revelations that came from Allah?
Yes, the situation is this. Muhammad, as we know, we look at his life, we know he was a man of truthfulness and reliability. He was known, for his reliability and truth-telling, his integrity of character. We know also that he received revelations. We know this because as Muslims, that God had revealed the Quran to the Prophet Muhammad. And the person who revealed it to him, Gabriel, even appeared to his companions on one occasion. The danger of her position is that if she pushes this too far, she cuts all the cords to her own religion. Because according to the New Testament, the Torah was revealed to Moses by an angel, which no one saw. What about that angel? Did anyone see the angel in the Old Testament? According to her own account, in Matthew, in 2 little verses, in Matthew 27, that there's a zombie apocalypse and huge numbers of people came out of their graves and was resurrected from the dead, walked around in broad daylight, and they went home, and no one knows anything about this apart from 2 little verses in an anonymous gospel written in the late first century. This is what your own scholars say. It's not by Matthew. Scholars today, you need to catch up. You're living in the Middle Ages.
In
today's world,
not all scholars
Oxford,
follow what
Cambridge,
Paul is
Yale, all the great universities, which are dominated by Christians, none of them think that the Apostle Matthew, none of them think that Matthew wrote the first gospel. That's a fact. It's not my conjecture, that is a fact.
Early church
so you're living in the medieval period before we thought the earth was round and before we thought that the earth went round the sun. So you're living deliberately in a backward time. That's called fundamentalism. You are the quintessential fundamentalist who refuses to embrace modern knowledge by your own scholars. If you did, you would admit that Matthew's gospel contains false information, unhistorical claims, and is not an eyewitness testimony. The Quran is much better attested.
You haven't given us a single
document.
eyewitness. You haven't given us a single eyewitness. We've read from the Hadith that actually, no, Gabriel didn't identify himself to these witnesses. There's not a single eyewitness to the Quran. You can't say God is the eyewitness. I want a human eyewitness who can be a
saw
witness.
The angel reveal the Torah to Israel. Can you name me one person who saw the angel?
Why are you doing this when actually
because
you
I'm
can't
applying
name
consistency.
Anything.
See, I'm playing her game back there. So she's smiling. She knows I'm playing her own game back.
Paul,
and you don't like it.
I'm asking you for a single eyewitness
to what?
To Muhammad's revelations, who heard the same voice that Muhammad heard.
His companions. Umar did.
No.
Their companions. It says that they were his companions, and they actually met Gabriel, and he was the angel of revelation.
Should we read it again? Are you going to that today? Okay.
Who did it say? Was it Umar? Who was there with him? It was Umar. Umar was a very trusted companion, a very senior companion of the Prophet.
Let's read it again.
He was a witness. How many witnesses were there to Matthew's claim that there's a mass resurrection of the dead? How many? No witnesses at all.
Matthew records it and he's an eyewitness.
But he's not an eyewitness.
And he's an eyewitness.
The gospel doesn't claim to be an eyewitness testimony. It's in the third person, not in the first person. Did you notice that?
Okay, let's look at this.
Did you notice not even in the first person? I saw. Umar is an eyewitness.
Okay, so we've got something Umar saying, hey, that was Gabriel. That was Gabriel. That was Jibril.
You asked for an eyewitness. I've given you his name. And Umar existed. Everyone accepts it exists in history.
So where's his hadith?
Umar.
Where's his hadith that he hears exactly what Muhammad hears? Where is it?
What do you mean?
So you said Umar witnessed, heard the voice. Oh, in this hadith?
Of course.
Okay.
This hadith is a Bukhari hadith. It is sahih. It is exquisitely reliable and factually correct.
It's written 200 years after Muhammad
they go right back
was dead.
to Muhammad.
Okay.
So you are denying a very reliable source here. Unlike your Matthew's Gospel, where your own scholars say is not an eyewitness account. Even Mike Licona admits that.
I love the way that you're drawing on Mike Licona, a particular scholar.
Now, and I'm very thirsty for obvious reasons.
So Paul has to run away because he can't convincingly show me from any hadith that shows me that there was a eyewitness to Muhammad's revelations. We've read the hadith here, and actually Muhammad has to explain that it was Gabriel. Gabriel doesn't reveal himself to the companions, goes, hi guys, Gabriel here. Really, I'm saying this so they all agree with each other, go, hey, did you hear that Gabriel said this? Yes, he said this, he did say this. They don't say that. Actually, they're completely dependent on Muhammad to tell them that it was Gabriel. And let me read that again. The man went away after I waited a long time. The prophet said to me, do you know who the questioner was, Umar? I replied, God and his messenger know best. In other words, no, I don't. He said, he was Gabriel. He came to teach you your religion. So the fact that it was Gabriel is something that has to be confirmed by Muhammad. There isn't any other witness apart from Muhammad himself to Gabriel's presence. Why are you following somebody, Muslims, which is completely uncorroborated by anybody other than Muhammad? I would suggest that actually Muhammad is not getting his revelations from Gabriel or Allah or anybody. They are all a fiction. They are all a product of his imagination.
Why would the guy say you are right?